Mike Greenlee. He was the neighborhood kid that told me there was no Santa Claus, there was no Easter Bunny, there was no Tooth Fairy. He blew my bubble. And when I asked my mom about it, we always had those end of the driveway conversations about 25 yards before we get to our house. And each time was devastating, lots of trauma. And then he told me about the birds and the bees. And I didn't want to believe it. And when Mom and I had that conversation, I said, "You mean..." Yeah. And I didn't understand why it seemed so gross to me, because I ended up coming out later as a gay man. So I guess it was more of the bees and the bees and the birds and the birds. So that was the reality of my childhood being shattered in Urbana, Ohio. In 1981, I remember reading, I swear it was a mimeograph paper, about a gay cancer that was in New York and Los Angeles. And I was in a bathhouse in Toledo, Ohio. How was that going to affect me? Growing up in the closet in a small town and a small university, we went to parks and bathhouses and roadside rest and bars that might have had just a light bulb to identify where it was with no name. It was a treacherous lifestyle to live. So that was the way I took it at the time, and kind of didn't pay attention until later on in the 80s. And I could say today that 25 years ago, Friday, will be my 25th anniversary of living with HIV. How about that? I'll never forget that day. The Tuesday after Labor Day, the blood was drawn, and it took 3 weeks back then. Now you can almost get it within minutes, the test results. I walked into the doctor's office. He opened the chart. HIV was written in large letters, so I knew right away. I came back to my office and said to my coworker, "John, I'm positive." And he said, "Oh, that's great, that's great." And I said, "John, I'm HIV positive." He knew I was going for the test, but he thought a situation had come out positive that we were working on. He was devastated, and I had to take him to lunch to support him rather than him supporting me. And we've talked about that for years ever since. And that afternoon, I received an award from the Pennsylvania Association of Rehabilitation Facilities. It was so hard to stand there in shock and receive the President's Award in front of family and friends and co-workers and people from throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Then the staff people from PARF, the association, we took an aerobics class together at 12th Street Gym. And I knew about a support group sponsored by ActionAIDS at St. Mark's Episcopal Church on Locust Street. And I was able to get right to that group on the first night. Back when half of this side of the room smoked, this side of the room didn't. And people were dropping like flies. And I made the decision to go off AZT, and I think that was probably the best decision. Because 25 years later, I'm living with it, and I'm thriving. And I'm getting older, and it's nice to get older or aging things like cataracts. Fun. But I think of Ronald Reagan, whose administration for 7.5 years said nothing. After the announcement by the CDC on June 5th, 1981. Ironically, Ronald Reagan died on June 5th. Poetic justice? Yes, it was. The next day was D-Day, and everybody would say, "Oh, that was Reagan-esque." But I'm proud to say that that part of it is over and the struggle goes on. And I feel blessed, having lost so many friends and family. 5 people from my small graduating class were within a 5-year range. We're alive. And we got mad as hell and we said we're not going to take it anymore. Silence equals death, and knowledge equals power. Thank ACT UP for doing what they've done, and thank all for doing what you've done to make it a better life for millions of people, despite Ronnie Reagan.